was the summer of 2016 when we moved into our new house in rural Indiana. We'd worked hard to get there, years of saving, agonizing over listings, and biting our nails through inspections and paperwork. Finally, though, we had our home. It was modest but warm, with a big backyard and just enough creaky floorboards to give it character. The previous owners had left behind a nearly new washer and dryer set, sleek, modern machines that practically hummed with efficiency. Our old set, while still functional, was ancient and loud enough to wake the dead. My husband, Derek, suggested we list the old ones online to make a little money back. I hadn't used Craigslist before, but our son Anthony, who was home from college for the summer, encouraged us to give it a try. Surprisingly, within just an hour of posting, calls and emails started flooding in. Apparently, people were desperate for cheap appliances. We fielded more than a dozen inquiries that first day, and by that evening we had a plan. Since we were going out of town for a family reunion that weekend, we told each interested buyer the same thing. We won't be home, but whoever shows up first thing Monday morning gets them. It felt strange trusting strangers like that, but we figured it was worth a shot. We left the washer and dryer disconnected and ready to go in the garage, thinking we'd save everyone time. What we didn't plan for was leaving Lydia, our 17-year-old daughter, home alone. She had begged to stay behind. She had a mild cold and insisted she didn't want to be cooped up in a car for hours only to be stuck with extended family she barely knew. We hesitated, but she was nearly an adult, and we were just a few hours away. We stocked the fridge, left emergency numbers, and made her promise to lock all the doors and stay in touch. Lydia was a quiet, responsible kid. We trusted her. We left Saturday morning, all of us crammed into the SUV, waving goodbye as Lydia stood in the doorway with a blanket over her shoulders and a box of tissues in hand. I remember thinking how mature she looked standing there, like she truly didn't need us anymore. That illusion shattered late Sunday night. We were in a motel near the reunion site when my phone rang. The screen lit up with Lydia's name. I answered immediately, but it wasn't her voice I heard first. It was the dispatcher's. "Mrs. Callahan, this is Officer Reynolds with the local police department. Your daughter is safe, but we need to inform you of an incident that occurred at your residence earlier this evening." My breath caught. I sat upright in bed, heart pounding. "What happened?" He passed the phone to Lydia, and I could hear her trembling as she spoke. "I was watching TV in bed when I heard a loud crash," she said, her voice shaking. Then voices. 2 men. She had frozen in place, unsure what to do. When she heard them moving around the living room, she grabbed her phone and silently slipped into the walk-in closet. From there, she dialed 911 and whispered her situation. The dispatcher, she said, kept her calm, speaking gently and asking her questions to keep her grounded while officers raced to the house. "I thought they were going to come in and take me," she said between sobs. "They stood right outside my door, talking. One of them said they were looking for something. She thought it was her. I couldn't breathe. I pictured her curled up in the darkness, alone and terrified, while strangers walked through our home." The dispatcher stayed on the line until the police arrived. There was a struggle, yelling, thudding, then silence. The dispatcher went quiet, too, and Lydia said those few seconds felt like hours. Then, finally, the voice returned. "It's over. You're safe. You can come out now." As she peeked out from the closet, officers were leading 2 handcuffed men through the hallway. One of them looked back at her and said nothing. Lydia just stood there, frozen, until one of the officers came over and gently introduced himself. We left the motel that night in a blur. I barely remember packing or checking out. Derek drove, but I can't recall a single thing we passed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lydia's face, scared and alone in that closet. We got home just after 2 a.m. The house was still surrounded by remnants of flashing lights. A patrol car idled outside, and 1 officer remained inside, waiting for us. The front door, now broken from being forced open, hung awkwardly on its hinges. I didn't wait for the car to stop. The moment we pulled into the driveway, I bolted from the passenger seat and ran to the front porch. Lydia opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she managed a tired smile. I gathered her into my arms, holding her like I hadn't in years. I didn't let go for a long time. Derek joined us, placing his hand on her back. "You okay, sweet pea?" he asked softly. She nodded against my shoulder. "I'm okay now." The officer walked us through what had happened. The 2 men, later identified as Jason Holt and Marcus Bell, had originally called about the washer and dryer. According to their statements during the interrogation, they'd planned to come Monday morning like everyone else. But when they heard we'd be out of town, they decided to cut corners and take the appliances early without paying. They hadn't known Lydia would be home. That was the part that haunted me the most. They swore up and down they were only there to steal, that they would have left if they knew someone was inside. But I didn't care. They broke into our home. They terrified my daughter. They stood outside her bedroom door, whispering about looking for something, and for all we knew, that something could have been her. The police were firm during our meeting the next morning. Both men had prior convictions, burglary, assault, even a weapons charge. The detectives assured us that they'd be going back to prison for a long time. Last we heard, they wouldn't be eligible for release until 2025. Still, with everything happening in the justice system, especially during the lockdown, I couldn't shake the fear that they might be released early. And what if they came back? What if they remembered Lydia? Lydia herself seemed to be doing okay, at least on the surface. She was quiet for a few days, kept mostly to her room, but she didn't have nightmares, and she didn't ask to sleep with the lights on. The therapist we found said she was doing well, all things considered. But trauma is sneaky. It hides in places where you least expect it, then bursts out when you're least prepared. I still don't know how deep the scars go. By Monday morning, we had returned to some semblance of a routine. Remarkably, someone still showed up to buy the washer and dryer. The first caller, a young couple in their early 20s. They were polite, cheerful, and thrilled to get the appliances for such a low price. We didn't say anything about what had happened the night before. How could we? It wasn't until months later, in a completely different context, that we ran into them again at the grocery store. We made small talk, and they mentioned the washer and dryer were still working great. That's when I finally told them the story. Their jaws dropped. The boyfriend laughed nervously and said, "Well, that puts a new spin on secondhand shopping, huh?" I laughed too, partly from relief, partly because I needed to. After everything, we were lucky. So many families don't get to laugh about these things. So many stories like ours end with funerals and court dates, not hugs and second chances. I think that's why this still scares me so much. Because it could have been worse. So much worse. We changed all the locks that week and installed a full security system. Cameras in every corner. Floodlights in the yard. Lydia wasn't thrilled about the constant surveillance, but she understood. The illusion of safety had been shattered. We had to rebuild it ourselves. As for Craigslist, I haven't used the site since. I know it's not inherently dangerous. Thousands of people buy and sell on it every day without issue. But the risk, however small, is there. We learned that the hard way. If there's one thing I'd say to anyone planning to sell something online, it's this: be cautious. Vet your buyers. Don't share too much about your plans, especially if you won't be home. And never, ever leave your child alone with an open listing. Lydia says she's moved on. She doesn't talk about that night anymore. She's in college now, thriving. She wants to be a therapist. She says it's because she knows how important it is to have someone to talk to when the world gets scary. I think that's brave. It happened in May of last year, and I still think about it every time I open my fridge. I had just signed the lease on a new place, a quiet little house on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The only problem was the landlord hadn't supplied a refrigerator. I'd spent most of my savings on the deposit, so I started looking for something cheap and functional. Garage sales were my first stop, but I struck out completely. Then I remembered Craigslist. I'd never used it before, but I figured it couldn't be worse than driving around trying to beat other bargain hunters to secondhand appliances. After just 10 minutes of scrolling, I found one, white basic, about 10 years old but clean and working. The price was $75. Not bad at all. I called the number listed, and a friendly-sounding woman picked up on the second ring. "Hi. Yeah, it's still for sale," she said cheerfully. "But I can't promise it'll be here when you get here, so if you want it, you might want to act fast." I paused. I didn't like the idea of sending money ahead of time, but $75 wasn't a fortune. Against my better judgment, I asked if she had PayPal. She did. I sent the money, and she emailed me a quick confirmation. We agreed I'd come by Saturday morning to pick it up. Saturday rolled around, and I texted her to say I was on the way. She replied with the address, an older ranch-style home in a neighborhood I didn't know too well. It was probably built in the 80s. The lawn was neat, the paint a little faded, but nothing looked sketchy. I parked out front, got out, and knocked on the door. That's when she answered it. A brown-haired woman in denim cutoffs and a tank top opened the door, and I'll admit, I was caught off guard. She was attractive, really attractive, and I definitely wasn't expecting that. I almost forgot why I was there. "You must be Carter," she said with a smile. "I'm Sonny." "Oh, yeah. Hey," I muttered, regaining my composure. "Nice to meet you." She led me inside. The house was clean and smelled like lavender and dryer sheets. I could hear a TV on somewhere in the back. We made small talk for a minute or two, nothing weird. She told me the fridge was in the garage, and her boyfriend would help me move it. I was relieved. I hadn't brought anyone to help, and I didn't want to kill my back. Right on cue, a big guy, at least 6'5", covered in tattoos, walked in from the kitchen. Sonny introduced him as John. He didn't say much, just nodded and gestured for me to follow him. Sonny disappeared down the hallway, and I never saw her again. John led me through the kitchen to the garage door. He opened it and pointed across the dark space. "There it is," he said. The refrigerator was all the way on the far side of the garage, almost backed up to the overhead door. The space was dim, no lights were on, and I could barely make out the shape of the fridge in the shadows. "Is there a light?" I asked. "Nah," he replied. "Bulb's been out a while. Haven't gotten around to changing it." I stood there a second. The only light bleeding in was from the open kitchen door behind me. "Mind opening the garage door for a little more light?" I asked. "It's busted," he said flatly. "Won't lift." That's when I started getting annoyed. I'd have to haul the thing back through the house. But I'd already paid, so what choice did I have? "All right," I sighed. I took a few steps into the garage. Maybe 3. That's when I felt something unusual under my shoes, a slick, crinkling texture. I looked down. Plastic. The whole garage floor was covered in a thin sheet of clear plastic. It was seamless, like it had been rolled out with purpose. My stomach tightened. I took another half step forward, scanning the space. To my left, in the dark corner, I heard a faint shuffling sound, like feet dragging or someone shifting weight. My instinct screamed at me, "Leave." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I looked over my shoulder. John's shadow was growing larger on the wall. He was closing the distance between us. That was enough. Without another word, I spun around and walked quickly, too quickly, back to the kitchen door. John was closer than I expected, maybe 4 feet behind me. I didn't make eye contact. "Ah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Forgot my dolly in the truck. Be right back." There was a dolly leaning against the garage wall. He pointed to it and started to say something, but I didn't stop. I moved past him, into the kitchen, then through the living room and out the front door. The second I was outside, I ran. I sprinted to my truck, jumped in, and tore down the street. I didn't slow down until I hit the main road. Once I got home, I sat in my driveway for a good 10 minutes, hands clenched on the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I didn't know what their plan was. I didn't want to know. I blocked Sunny's number and deleted her texts. I didn't even look at the messages she sent after I left. Curiosity wasn't worth it. Then I logged onto Craigslist and tried to report the listing. It was already gone. I searched for another half hour, trying to find anything, any new posts, anything under the same username, but it was like they'd vanished. I called the police and made a report. I tried to sound calm, logical. I didn't want to come across like I was making things up. The officer on the phone listened, asked a few basic questions, and promised they'd look into it. I never heard back. And honestly, I didn't care. I was alive. That was enough. I didn't want the $75 back. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to forget it ever happened. A week later, I found a garage sale 3 blocks from my house. They had a used refrigerator, only $100, and in better shape than the one from Craigslist. I bought it on the spot and got help loading it up. That fridge is still in my kitchen today. Works like a charm. Nowadays, I stay far away from Craigslist. I know not everyone has a bad experience. Plenty of people buy and sell there safely every day. But after what happened to me, I realized something. It's not just about being smart. It's about trusting your instincts. If something feels off, leave. Don't hesitate. Don't let politeness get you killed. If you do decide to use Craigslist or any online marketplace, bring a friend. Meet in public. Never go alone to someone's home, especially if you've already paid. And if you step into a garage and the floor is covered in plastic, run. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gone further into that garage. Maybe nothing. Maybe they really were just weird people selling a fridge. But my gut says otherwise, and I've learned to trust that feeling. Some people ignore it and end up on the news. I'm just glad I didn't. I've always been a collector. Not of stamps or coins, but of music. Old school stuff, cassettes, CDs, even vinyl. But what I'd been after for a long while was a shelf unit stereo. You know the kind, CD changer, dual cassette deck, decent turntable, and solid speakers. The type that used to sit front and center in any living room during the 90s. I'd seen one in a YouTube video, which reignited the obsession. After a few hours of clicking through Amazon and eBay, I realized I wasn't going to find what I wanted for less than $300. That was out of the question. Then I remembered Craigslist, unfiltered, unpredictable Craigslist. Within 10 minutes of searching, I found one. It was nearly perfect, everything I was looking for. The seller had uploaded a few grainy pictures, but the gear looked well kept. I didn't waste time. I texted the number, and within half an hour, we'd agreed to meet in the parking lot of a Walmart off Highway 19. The time? 8 p.m. It wasn't ideal, after dark, in a lot not known for its friendliness, but I'd dealt with Craigslist before. I figured I'd park close to the building under a light, keep it quick. I left my house around 7:30, cash in my pocket. $100. I wasn't worried. I'd done this sort of thing before, and nothing had ever gone wrong. I arrived on time and circled the lot, looking for someone holding a stereo or a vehicle with the trunk open. Nothing. After about 15 minutes of circling, I gave up. I thought I'd been ghosted. It happens. Maybe they sold it to someone else. Maybe it was never real to begin with. I started heading toward the exit near the highway when I saw two guys standing by a beat-up sedan, waving their arms. I slowed down. They weren't near the store entrance or any of the light poles. They were parked way out near the edge of the lot, where the shadows stretched long and the security cameras didn't quite reach. Something about it felt off, but I'd already come this far. I pulled over and parked next to them. Both men approached my window. One was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark eyes and a shaved head. The other was shorter, stockier, and stayed a few steps behind. The tall one leaned in. "You here for the stereo?" I nodded. "Yeah, thought we were meeting closer to the building." He gave a lazy shrug. "Couldn't find a space." "You got the cash." That should have been the moment I left. There were plenty of open spaces closer to the store. This guy was lying, and I knew it. But I didn't want to seem paranoid, and I certainly didn't want to start a confrontation over a stupid stereo. So I got out of the car. We made small talk for a minute while I scanned the area. No stereo in sight. The shorter guy had drifted behind me, and I didn't like that at all. I assumed he was just getting something out of the car, or maybe I hoped that. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded bills. That's when I felt it. A hard jab in my lower back, followed by a cold, metallic pressure. I froze. "Don't move," the tall guy said. I looked up. He was now pointing a pistol at my chest. The gun looked old but well maintained. His finger was on the trigger. My first instinct was to scream for help, but I kept my mouth shut. There were two of them, both armed. No one nearby. No cameras. No one watching. It was a clean setup. "Give me the cash," he said. I handed it over. "Phone too." I hesitated. My phone was new, an iPhone I'd just made my second payment on. But I didn't argue. I took it out slowly and handed it to him. "Good," he said. "Now get the hell out of here." They turned toward their car. The short guy gave me a nod, like this was just business. In a way, maybe it was. I stood there, stunned, as they got in and drove off. My legs felt like wood. My mouth was dry. I stared at the empty lot, the tail lights disappearing behind a row of hedges. It wasn't until the car was gone that I realized I was shaking. I didn't even have a phone to call the police. I had to walk the 200 yards to the front of the store and explain what had happened to a greeter who looked at me like I had two heads. A manager let me use their phone, and I called 911. The police arrived surprisingly fast. I gave a statement, described the two men, their car, the gun, everything. I could tell by their faces they weren't hopeful. "This kind of thing happens more than you'd think," one officer said. "They move quick. Use fake names, fake numbers. Turn off the phone and disappear." I asked if they could trace the number I'd texted. They said they'd try, but it was probably a burner. Then came the mugshot binder. They asked me to flip through pages of criminals, looking for familiar faces. I didn't expect to see them, but I did. Page 34. 2 rows down. The tall guy. I pointed at him. "That's him." "And the other one?" I flipped a few more pages and found the shorter man. The detective raised an eyebrow. "You're not the first." It turns out they'd pulled this scam before. I was their fifth known victim. Out of the 5, 3 had been robbed. 2 had been beaten. 1 didn't make it. That last detail hit like a freight train. I'd been lucky. Had I resisted, hesitated, or even mouthed off, I might not have walked away. The police didn't say much else. They had enough to open a file, but the suspects were long gone. No active addresses. No parole officers. No family contacts. Just ghosts. I went home that night and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The fake friendliness. The switch from casual to lethal. The way the cold metal felt against my back. I kept wondering what I could have done differently. But in the end, I did everything right. I met in a public place. I checked the listing. I didn't go alone, but I stayed in the open. Still, it didn't matter. They moved the meeting spot at the last second, and I went along with it. That was the mistake. I never got my phone back. Never got my money back. And I never got a stereo. What I did get was a lesson. One that cost me more than cash. Craigslist isn't evil. Neither is Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp. It's the people behind the screens you have to watch out for. Since then, I've made a rule. If the deal changes last minute, I cancel. No exceptions. I meet in daylight. In front of a police station if I can. And I always tell someone where I'm going. The stereo? I ended up finding 1 month later at an estate sale. $60. Works like a dream. Some people collect baseball cards. Others collect old coins or comic books. Me? I collect VHS tapes. Yeah, I know it's weird. Obsolete even. But there's something timeless about those chunky little boxes of magnetic memory. I've got over 1,000 now. Everything from studio releases to home-recorded tapes of forgotten TV specials. I even have a few family videos that someone somewhere threw away. That's the thing about VHS. It holds onto pieces of the past that someone at some point decided to discard. That's what makes it fascinating, and sometimes horrifying. It started a couple of years ago. I'd found a Craigslist listing from a guy giving away a box of tapes for free. Said it was taking up space in his garage, and he just wanted it gone. No details, no labels, no inventory listed. That's exactly the kind of mystery I live for. I jumped on it. An hour later, I was back in my apartment with a cardboard box containing 44 tapes. Most were blank or had peeling labels. A few had handwritten notes like Wedding 1991 or NBC 1987. I didn't have time to watch them all, so I shoved the box in my closet and forgot about it. 9 months later, I remembered it. By then, my collection had taken over most of my spare bedroom. I'd even built custom shelves to hold all the tapes. One night, while going through my inventory, I realized I never finished watching the Craigslist haul. I pulled the box out and made a plan. Me and my girlfriend, Britt, would spend the evening watching them. She liked the weird, retro nostalgia just as much as I did. She arrived around 7. We made dinner, had some Butterfinger-flavored ice cream, and settled in for a night of analog entertainment. The first few tapes were exactly what I expected. An episode of Battlestar Galactica, some old HBO movies, a wedding video. Britt especially liked the wedding. She said it was sweet, watching total strangers commit their lives to each other with shaky camcorder footage and bad perms. Then we popped in the 4th tape. It started like the others, another wedding. Same era. Same grainy picture. The couple was about to cut the cake. I was getting bored, so I told Britt I was going to take a bathroom break and have a smoke. She nodded, too engrossed in the screen to say much. I stepped outside for a quick cigarette. I wasn't gone more than 5 minutes. When I came back inside, I stopped in the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when I heard her. Eli, get in here." Her voice was sharp. Panicked. I ran into the living room. Britt sat frozen, her hands over her mouth, eyes wide, glued to the screen. What's going on?" She didn't answer. Just hit the rewind button. A few seconds later, she pressed play and patted the couch beside her. I sat down, heart starting to race. The video picked up where the wedding had ended. The screen went static for a second, and then, another scene. Now a man stood in front of the camera, adjusting it. He stepped away, revealing a bedroom with a woman lying nude on the bed. She looked relaxed, maybe even bored. The man climbed onto the bed. They started getting intimate. I figured it was just some weird home video that accidentally got taped over the wedding. Not my thing, but not exactly shocking. Then the woman whispered, "Choke me." The man did. At first, it seemed like a consensual kink. I was uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. Britt sat stiff beside me, staring without blinking. The woman began gasping, but the man didn't stop. Her hands reached for his arms, clawing, pulling. Still, he kept going. Eventually, her body went slack. He let go. They both lay there for a moment. Silent. Completely still. Then he turned toward her and stared. "No way," I muttered. "No way, man." He shook her. No response. He slapped her cheek. Still nothing. He started crying, deep, guttural sobs. Then suddenly he remembered the camera. In one quick motion, he reached out and slammed his hand on it. The screen went to static, and stayed that way. We sat frozen. Britt finally pressed stop. "Dude," I said. It was the only word I could get out. She turned to me, pale. "What do we do?" I didn't have an answer. My brain was still trying to convince itself it was fake. A prank. Maybe even a lost scene from some amateur horror flick. "Let me think," I said. "I need air." I stepped outside again, but this time the smoke didn't calm me. I paced, ran through possibilities. Could it be staged? Maybe. But the panic in the man's voice, that wasn't acting. And the woman's eyes, they were too empty. I came back in and told Britt we needed to report it. But carefully. Just having that tape was a crime. We agreed to try contacting the guy I got the box from. Maybe he knew where it came from. I sent emails. No reply. I called the number from the old Craigslist listing. Disconnected. Eventually, I drove by the address I'd picked up the tapes from. The house was empty. For sale sign out front. Gone. Out of options, we took the tape to the police. I wore gloves. We put it in a blank case with a brief note and dropped it off at the local station's after-hours drop box. I didn't sign my name. I didn't want to be arrested for trying to help. I figured they'd call. They never did. Weeks passed. Then Britt stopped answering my texts. When she finally called, her voice was hollow. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that woman." I didn't argue. "I got it." We said goodbye. The tape changed everything. I still collect VHS, but now I'm cautious. Every time I load an unlabeled cassette, I brace myself. Will it be an old sitcom? A birthday party? Or another window into something awful? I've thought a lot about that man on the tape. Was it a mistake? Was he a killer? Was she already fragile? Was it just a tragic accident? I'll never know. Maybe I don't want to.